Welcome to the MSU Deer Labs online seminar series, brought to you by Mississippi State University Extension Service and the Forest and Wildlife Research Center. My name is Steve Damaris, and I'm the Taylor Chair in Applied Big Game Research and Instruction at Mississippi State University. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to step away from deer management for just a moment. You have probably been to a large meeting, whether it's a Rotary Club or a church service or a funeral. And let's suppose you're going to a large meeting and the capacity for that room is 150 people. And I have 5 different columns here. The minutes prior to the beginning of the event, I'm going to have a column for the number of people arriving at that interval. And I'm going to have a column for the total number of people. And then we're going to look at the rate, the number of arriving people per minute, and then the seating options available to those people. 14 to 15 minutes prior to the start of this meeting, funeral, wedding, you're going to have a couple people show up. First 2 people walk in, there's a total of 2 people present, and it's a 2-minute interval, so there was 1 person arriving per minute. And when they get there, seating options are totally unlimited. Every seat in the place is open, and they can go sit wherever they want. The next 2-minute interval, from 12 to 13 minutes, prior to the start of the event. Now 4 people come in. There's a total of 6, and 4 people came in during 2 minutes, so the rate of arrival is 2 people per minute. And the seating options are still pretty well unlimited, mostly unlimited. A lot of seats still available. Now in the next 2-minute interval, from 11 to 10 minutes prior to the start of the event, now 12 people show up for an arrival rate of 6 people per minute, total present 18. And we're still mostly unlimited. 150 seats in the place and there's only 18 people. You can pretty much pick out your row, and you certainly have a lot of variation within rows. From 9 to 8 minutes before the start, now people are kind of coming in groups and a regular flow. You've got 20 people came in these 2 minutes. That's 10 people per minute for a total population of 38. Now there's some limitation to the seats. You can't sit wherever you want to, but there's still quite a bit of seating options. From 7 to 6 minutes. Now it's really getting close to the start of the event. 26 people come into the room, total of 64. That arrival rate is 13 per minute. They're really coming through that door pretty regularly. And now 64 people, that's almost half the seats are being taken up. And so the seating options are now becoming somewhat limited. You don't have a lot of options like you did if you'd been there 15 minutes before the thing started. The next 2-minute interval from 4 to 5 minutes, 36 people come through the doors, 18 people per minute with a total of 100 people. 2/3 of the room is filled up. And now you really are somewhat limited in seating options. From 3 to 2 minutes prior to the start of the event, another 26 people come in. Total of 126 people now. The arrival rate of 13 people per minute. And now, you've got 24 seats left in the whole room. You're pretty limited about where you can sit. Some of those may be in the middle of a row, and you don't really want to step over all those people to get to them. So you're mostly limited in where you can sit. And then right around the start of the event, from a minute before to a minute after, 14 people come in. You know, those people that are coming in right at the beginning. If you're at the Rotary Club, the president is hitting the gavel. Let's start the meeting. And there's 140 people now in this room. Seating is very, very limited. Now, there's always some late arrivers. 2 to 3 minutes after the program starts, 8 people show up. Arrival rate of 4 per minute. 148 total people. Now the seating options are kind of uncomfortable. When those people sit down, there's only 2 seats left. And you, even these 8 people are going to have a hard time finding and getting to those seats. Another 4 people come in 4 to 5 minutes after the event started. 2 people per minute, total of 152 now. We have now exceeded the capacity of the room by 2. So even if all 4 of those people wanted to sit down, at best 2 of them could, and it's so late they may just kind of stand around the outside to watch, kind of in the back of the room. Oh, a couple more come in. And now we've got 154 people, and this is really, really awkward. There's no place left to sit. This shows the growth of a population of people within a room at a meeting or a church service, a funeral, or a wedding. And to review the seating options, early on, seating options were unlimited. They became somewhat limited, somewhat restricted. Around 100, 2/3 of the room is occupied. Becomes very restricted out around 140, and then it becomes very uncomfortable, very awkward when you start getting up at that high-end capacity and really after the start of the event. This scenario I just ran for you for total number of people coming into a room for a meeting is similar to what we're going to talk about in deer management. And I want to look now at the arrival rate of those people. This is the number of people arriving per minute. And you can see the rate of arrival increases dramatically up to 10, 13, 18 people per minute. Then it starts tapering back past that peak time of arrival of 18 down to 13, and then right around the start of the event is 7, down to 4, down to 2, down to 1 per minute at the very, very end. And if you are let's say you're a salesman or saleswoman, you've been given permission to hand out a flyer, but only for 6 minutes. What 6 minutes would you choose to stand out at the front of that room to hand out your flyers? Would you choose it to do that where there's 1 or 2 people arriving per minute? Or would you pick the 6 minutes where you have the greatest recruitment of new people that you could hand those flyers out to? You've got 13, 18, and 13. That gives you the largest number of people. So there's this arrival rate, there's a total population. We could plot those above each other and see an interesting pattern here. The total number of people arriving in blue and the arrival rate below it in kind of a dark orange or red. And these same patterns can be seen in deer populations. A lot of states back in the mid-1900s didn't even have deer populations, particularly in the southern states, because most of the southern states were farmed. If you have 90 to 95% of your land in your state in farmland, you don't have a lot of room for deer, and you have people that are living hand to mouth, particularly in the 1930s during the Depression time, where people are basically looking for food in the woods whenever they can get it because they can't afford to go to the grocery store and buy it. So deer populations were really low in the mid-1900s, and so our state wildlife agency started releasing deer, trying to repopulate deer, and they were very, very successful. Populations have grown pretty successfully since those early days. By the 1980s, we had lots of deer throughout the southeast in most areas. How many? Well, depends on your perspective. If you're a farmer, you might not want near as many deer in your eating your soybean fields. If you're a landowner in a suburban area where you have deer eating your landscape plants, you might think you have too many deer. If those deer are bringing in ticks that harbor Lyme disease, you may think you have too many deer. If you're loved one of this woman, you are very concerned with there being too many deer along this road. So the number of deer is almost always an argument. How many deer do we have, and how many deer do we need? If you're a hunter and you're dissatisfied with the number of deer that you're seeing when you go out hunting, your point of view, your perspective is We need more deer. If you're a farmer trying to grow soybeans, your opinion is we have too many deer. If you're in a neighborhood that's overpopulated with deer, there are too many deer. Perhaps you're a hunter and you're saying, hey, we have just about the right number. I'm pretty happy with the number I see and the quality of the deer. There's a lot of variation in what people want from deer. We're going to focus on landowners and hunters' perspectives and understanding that deer populations grow. There weren't very many mid-1900s. Now we have a lot. This graph shows a long-term study that was conducted on 1,300 acres in Michigan. This was a fenced property in Michigan. The population was started in 1928 with just a few animals. And they studied that deer population every year. That first deer year, 10 deer, they increased to 20 deer, to 30 deer. By year 4, they're up near 50 deer. By the end of 8 years, that deer population grew from 10 deer to 225 deer. In the period of 8 years, that's a remarkably rapid rate of increase in the deer population. You might think it's almost unbelievable. Don't you wish your investments were to increase at that rate of return on investment? Wow. And then come again in the mid 70s, they decided to redo the initial study and they dropped the population way back to near 10 again. And they sampled the number of deer every year. And after 7 years, the deer numbers in that 1,300 acres had exceeded 200 animals. So it was almost an identical rate of growth for that deer population in this 1,300 acre enclosure. This deer population growth rate that we saw in the Michigan studies is pretty indicative of white-tailed deer population growth rate in other areas and even other deer species across the world. This figure shows deer population dynamics, and I have 3 lines on it: population size in the red dashed line, deer production in the solid green line, and deer quality in the blue dotted line. Now you may recognize 2 of these lines. The red population size line looks a lot like the plot of people arriving at the large meeting we talked about earlier. That total number of people at the meeting, when I plotted it in the figure, looked a lot like this population size. And if you looked at the number of people arriving per minute at that meeting, it very closely mimics the deer production line in green. Now, looking at all 3 of these at one time might be a little complicated, so what I want to do is break them down individually for you. This slide shows the red line, the red dashed line, which is population size, or very equivalently, the density. Density is just the number of animals per unit of area, and population size is the total number of animals in the population. So you're just adjusting the population size based on an area for that population and gives you density. So they're roughly equivalent in terms of numbers here. What we see over time is an initial slow growth rate, just like we did in that large meeting example where some of the people started showing up early and then there was a rush kind of at a prime time where people were coming in at a rapid rate. Well, there's a slow growth rate to a deer population as well. And then we transition into a rapid growth rate period. And then after that rapid growth rate occurs, there's a slowing of the growth rate. Now, in all 3 cases, the population size is increasing over time. The only difference and the reason the line is shaped differently, sloped differently, is that the rate of addition of animals into the population varies based on the number of years. So the early years, the growth rate would be relatively slow, followed by a period of a number of years where there's a rapid growth rate, and then a number of years where there's a declining growth rate. Total population size or density has a distinctive shape. In this case, it looks like a snake or an S, and with enough years, that population growth rate declines to basically zero. At that point, the deer population has reached maximum sustainable density. I prefer that term over what the ecologists use as K carrying capacity, because maximum sustainable density tells you exactly what we're meaning here. It's the most deer that can be sustained in that habitat area consistently over time. If the population is maintained at that maximum sustainable density over time, the population eventually damages the quality of the habitat. This continued foraging pressure damages the plant community over time and thus actually lowers the maximum sustainable density. That blue dotted line refers to population quality or health, and this represents the health of individual animals and collectively for the population as a whole. Early in the growth rate of the population, the quality or health of the deer is very high. This is a high health level because they have a low density and they have excellent foraging conditions. There's abundance of quality forage, so they're healthy. With increasing population size or density, there is a decline in the forage supply, the quality and potentially the quantity of the food supply, and the declining quality of the forage causes a decline in the health of the animals living on that forage. And at the point of maximum sustainable density, the health of the individuals and the population overall reaches its lowest point at that maximum sustainable density. Forage quality and quantity are extremely limiting to the population, and they are as good as what they eat. They are eating low quality forage, and so they are not healthy. The population numbers and their health combine to affect population production, or the net addition of deer into a population within a given year. Now, on the left side of this figure, the addition of animals is relatively low because there are very few does in the population to produce fawns. However, every one of those does is extremely healthy because they are in healthy habitat, and so they're able to maximize their fawn production. Those fawns grow up into other deer, adult deer, and they in turn start reproducing. So you end up with more does, but still healthy habitat, healthy does, maximizing their fawn production. The more does you add to the population, the more fawns can be produced, and thus the greater the net addition of deer into the population. That rate of increase of the population continues unabated with more and more does producing more and more fawns until the habitat reaches a point where increasing numbers of does is offset by the declining health of the does. So that's when this inflection point in the sigmoid growth curve, or the S-shaped growth curve, occurs, and that's when the many does present in the habitat but their declining health starts limiting the net production of deer into the population per year. As we shift to the right further along that red population growth curve in time, there are still many more does, but their health continues to decline, and so their ability to produce fawns continues to decline. And so the net addition of deer starts going down significantly. This is happening due potentially to a couple things. One is that reduction of number of fawns being produced by the doe or her reproductive success in combination with changes in the survival rate of deer in the population. So there's net addition is that combination of fawns produced and the survival of the animals in the population. As that red line reaches its maximum sustainable density, we see that there are essentially no animals added within a year. The net addition is zero. That does not mean that there are no fawns being produced. It just means that the number of fawns being produced and recruited into the population is equivalent to the number of deer that are dying in that population each year, so that there's no net growth in the population. And that declining productivity, that declining health of the deer population is tied to regulatory factors, which impact the population growth rate or deer health.